Alright, it's time for a sci-fi fantasy and weird title with The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein. Let's get this. Here we go. Oh, look at that. He's beside one of the other bigs. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm here to review The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It is the 8th title that I'm reading in my sci-fi fantasy and weird exploration. It's definitely goes into science fiction out of those three options, and it was written in 1966. And Robert, this is my first book of Robert Heinlein's that I have read. He's one of the big three of science fiction authors, along with Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. And I've read works of either from both of them, so I thought it was time to get this one in order. So here I am reading it. I read it a while ago, and I started off strong, then it got sort of backburnered, and then I got back into it, and then I wasn't really enjoying it, so it took a little longer than I expected to get through it. So this one is actually, it's set on the moon, and the moon is actually, from reading Wikipedia, they describe the moon as a penal colony, which is something that I did not pick up on when I was reading it, other than the fact of that if you go to the moon, basically, if you stay there for X period of time, you pretty much have to stay. So in that sense, it is a penal colony. Once you live there, you're not going to live anywhere else. But that said, there's not any jails or anything like that. It has its own form of government, and, you know, lots of people live there and work there, and there's trade, you know, their trade with the earth, you know, and anyway, so but the story itself sort of wraps around sort of there's several characters, including the protagonist is Manny, and he befriends the AI entity that he names Mike, and between them and a professor and a political agitator, they pretty much start a revolution, and to sort of take down the authority, which is literally called the authority, or to take the power away from the authority on the moon. I don't know if I can't remember if the authority is just part of the moon or if it's part of Earth and the moon. People still live on Earth. There's lots of people on Earth. There is some trade back and forth between the moon and the Earth, but they're feeling like, you know, they're not being able to. I don't even know. To be honest, I don't remember. I don't remember because it became very clear to me that this actually, in my opinion, is not so much science fiction as it is a sci-fi set, social commentary, political intrigue type of thing. It is really about revolution. It is not so much about science fiction. And that's when my interest level started to wane, because although I do think science fiction is a great venue to explore social commentary, depending on what it is commenting on. Socially, I may or may not be interested. In this one, I wasn't that interested. I did like some of the characters. I love the character of Mike, the computer, the AI entity. He was great. Great dialogue between him and Manny, a really interesting relationship there. But I didn't love the setting of the moon, how they set up the social structure of the moon. It's got this weird, I'm sure there's been analysis, gender analysis on this one, you know, because I think there's sort of, it really was not, in my opinion, was not very gender friendly, and I did not like the role of women, although it is they say that women have all the power, and that doesn't really read to me in terms of, like, it's sort of socially they have all the power, but they don't seem to have very much power anywhere else, with the exception of Wyo, who is the political agitator. Anyway, it's for me, it's a lot of work to describe and explain what the story is about, and for me, because I didn't really enjoy it, it's not really worth it. And I did not like the gender dynamics, and that's what most of the orange flags are about. In particular, I really didn't like sort of what sort of offshoots to get the story going really fast really bothered me. And I had trouble with the characters, because in terms of, like, how they felt about what was okay or not okay in terms of getting what they wanted and what that represented. And for me, felt pretty much like wanting to set up, it felt a little more like anarchy than anything else. Like, I can understand not wanting to be under, especially these days, not wanting to be under the government that you're under. But like, there's also, I don't know, how you go about it, and what you're willing to do and who you're willing to do that to, and whether or not they have any say in it. And that gets all into very, very complicated territory, in my opinion. So, and I wasn't really along the same uh, point of view or morality compass as the characters. So as the story went on, that became more and more of an issue. That said, I did think some of some of the writing was really interesting. The language and the tempo was very different than I expected. I actually read the first page or so back in my first page reading, which is I think in September. I'll put a link for that. And the tempo is very different, and I did enjoy the language. And again, I particularly enjoyed Mike and Manny when they spoke to each other. And I loved how Mike would say, "Manny, my first and best friend," and he would have all these great ways of describing people. And but I really felt for the character of Mike, who was the computer. That was probably my favorite character. So anyway, this one I felt really complicated, like not complicated. Mostly, I felt like I didn't enjoy it. It's one of those books that like it brings up the question: is when is a good point to, like, do you want to complete reading a book that you're not enjoying? That was a question that I was tussling with while I was reading it. In this case, I did, I think because I wasn't thinking about it so much until afterwards, but also because it does have a film adaptation coming out. I did want to read one of Heinlein's work. I do like broadening my scope in terms of the genres that I'm interested in, and science fiction is definitely one of those. So there were enough yeses to keep pushing through, and I was curious to see what would happen, although as it kept going, I was liking a lot of it less and less. So although it did have some interesting things in it, I'm trying to remember now if there's a film coming out or a TV series. It would be a great TV series. There's definitely enough of an arc and a long story there to do a TV series. But I think you could also use, like, do it in film. You just have to make different choices. So, but I do think it's film. I think that's what it is, because often with TV series, I'll read them afterwards. Anyway, so overall, I just, wasn't for me. I think that's going to be some of the case with some of the older science fiction, that especially when gender is, not equally represented or not, embraced as, equals. That's definitely going to be an issue. But I think it also is one that does tend to come up in science fiction, so it's interesting to see approaches, but when it just feels sort of outdated, and then it's less interesting, and I don't want to be spending that much time with it. So that being all that said, am I happy I read it? I don't know. In some ways it'll actually make me realize that probably, depending on who's doing the film or TV series, it actually might let me know that I am actually not interested as opposed to interested, which is not something I would have anticipated. I would have just anticipating enjoying it and being excited, but maybe I've spent enough time with this story and I can move on to other stories. That said, I actually am really excited because I actually don't know what I'm going to pick for science fiction to read next. It could easily be one of these two bad boys, with The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury or 2001 by Arthur C. Clarke, but I haven't made a decision yet. So if you have a suggestion for a science fiction and a sci-fi book for me to pick up next, I would love to hear it. Anything that feels like the opposite of this book is definitely something that I want to dive into. Oh god, that's a little harsher than everyone's like enjoys what they enjoy, and that said, that means it's totally fine that I did not enjoy this one. So oh well, I did finish it though. I did finish it. Thanks for watching.